Hi, this is Seth Breedlove with Small Town Monsters, and you're listening to the Monster Guys podcast.
This is Lyle Blackburn, and you're listening to the Monster Guys podcast. What you're going to see in this Mothman documentary, even I was like, wow, I've never seen this stuff before. It's just we're so thankful that people were willing to share the films and the audio clips and their thoughts on the Mothman case. Strike a distance, turn a face, time to take what's yours. Each day it grows a little harder. With each hour, come to pass. Sins of the Father still following you. It just goes on and on and on. Burn, burn, southern sky. You've got the fire of midnight in your eyes. Burn, burn, southern soul. Soon they will know that you are the one, you are the one.
Welcome to the Monster Guys podcast. I'm DC McGannon, and as always, I'm here with my partner and co-conspirator in all things creative, C. Michael McGannon. And tonight we have two very special guests on our show. Both of these guys, Michael, are return guests for us.
They are, and I was going to say, whoever had said we feed on our guests as zombies or whatever comment that was, this proves it. We're not zombies.
We are not zombies. We do not feed on our guests. We do have guests return to the show, and we're very excited to have Seth Breedlove with Small Town Monsters and Lyle Blackburn of Boggy Creek Monster fame. How you doing, gentlemen?
Great.
Wonderful. I'm glad we got the one-word response from both of you at the exact same time. That's awesome.
That was almost rehearsed.
I waited for Lyle. I could actually see Lyle, so I waited until he talked before I said mine. That way it just came out simultaneously.
I liked the way we worked that out. It was just like, boom, boom. There you go.
The music you were just listening to is from the brand new CD by Ghoultown called Ghost of the Southern Sun. This is Lyle Blackburn's band that I think is kind of on a little bit of a summer tour right now. They've just released this CD, but man, let me tell you, this CD rocks. It is a driving CD.
I've been listening to it on repeat since yesterday, I believe, so it's really good. And the album art is pretty darn fantastic too.
Yeah, it's stunning. Let me tell you something. You mow the lawn to this CD, and it's like you're dropped into the middle of like the desert, and your lawnmower automatically picks up by 20 miles an hour.
What are you mowing?
And you're mowing over enemies in the desert and all. I mean, it is freaking awesome. I'm maneuvering around cacti and large lizards and life-size whiskey bottles, all kinds of stuff.
So is the grass actually mowed?
I don't know. I didn't want to go back and look at the pattern that ended up in the grass by the end of the day, but listening to Ghoultown while mowing a lawn is a surreal experience. And about halfway through, if you're like us and like me today, I was mowing about 10 acres worth of property. About halfway through that, under the baking sun, who needs drugs? Who needs whiskey? If you've got that CD playing under that sun mowing a lawn, you are free. Let me tell you.
Strong enough on its own. Huh?
It is powerful. So enjoy those tracks. Obviously, we use those tracks by permission. Lyle gave us permission to use those because we wanted you to hear some of that. Go check out that music. So awesome. Also, obviously, we're talking to Seth and Lyle about the new movie that's going to drop tomorrow, The Mothman of Point Pleasant. You'll hear all about that in just a few minutes. But if you want to read our review of the film, we had the privilege of screening the film last month, and we posted a review about that at themonsterguys.com. Go check that out. You are definitely going to want to get your eyeballs on this film tomorrow. Seth tells us during the interview everywhere you can get it. Obviously, shop.smalltownmonsters.com. It'll be available, I think, on Amazon and Vimeo and different places, and he gives us more info about that during the interview. But this is the film to watch right now. A really stunning, lush, moving film, in my opinion.
It is. It really gets to the heart and soul of the town itself and the townspeople instead of just focusing on the fantastic story that took place there. We've been kind of delving into the Mothman pretty deep this year, and it covers all of the ground and gets deeper than I think anywhere else I've seen so far. So
yeah, definitely. So we'll leave the bulk of our conversation about that film for the interview because we go into quite a bit of depth. Seth and Lyle also talk to us more about their future projects with Small Town Monsters, what's coming from them, which is very, very exciting.
I can't wait.
You know, at this point, I'm just always looking forward to the next Small Town Monsters project.
That's true.
I really am.
That's
so
good too.
Yeah, it's something worth looking forward to, and I just can't wait to see what they're doing next. So, and you'll hear more about that in the interview. Also, Michael, as we move toward the next few months, we're still looking for some stories from people, their paranormal experiences with shadow people, sleep paralysis, ghost stories, whatever you've got, whether you've come face to face with a Bigfoot or Dogman, or you have a ghost story of your own, we'd like you to share that with us. Go to our website, themonsterguys.com. You'll see a tab there where you can share your story or communicate with us. We're gathering some stories, and we're going to pick a handful of those stories. In just a few months, we're going to do a special episode of personal experiences, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be obviously the way we do everything. We're going to be very respectful with those stories, but I think it's going to be a great show, and I'm looking forward to that. So if you're listening and you have an experience, we'd love to hear from you. Please go to the website, themonsterguys.com, and give us your story. Also, as a part of this episode, we have some exclusive content. We don't talk about this a lot because we haven't done a lot with it up until now, but The Monster Guys has a Patreon page, patreon.com/The Monster Guys. Pretty easy. Go there, check it out. We do have an exclusive piece from this interview with Seth and Lyle posted there that goes into more detail about some Mothman sightings in modern day, some of the things that Seth and Small Town Monsters were accused of, and some insight into their future projects and what Lyle's up to also with Ghoultown and with Boggy Creek and some of the things he's been doing. So definitely check that out. You can support the Monster Guys for less than a soda a month. You know, a lot of people say less than a coffee, but we're even cheaper than that. So we're
coffee's kind of expensive these days.
Yeah, coffee is pretty expensive, so definitely cheaper than all that. But we appreciate your patronage and helping us just get better. Obviously, it's a brand new thing for us. We haven't promoted it a lot, but we would like to start sharing it because we are putting some exclusive content up there. I think we had one with Ken Gerhard last month that we posted that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's get into this interview. Seth Breedlove, Lyle Blackburn with Small Town Monsters. We're going to talk to them about the Mothman of Point Pleasant. The rest of the month, we've got some exciting things on the podcast, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. The month of May was our very best month in all the time that we've been doing this. More downloads, more listeners, more new listeners than ever before. And let me just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening. It's a great privilege to share with you our stories and our interviews and the things that we talk about here on the Monster Guys podcast. It only gets better from here, and I'm not going to say much about it, but July is going to be a lot of fun as well. June's pretty jam-packed too, but what we've got planned for July is going to be a lot of fun, especially for those that listen to the Monster Guys podcast. So look forward to some great times this summer, and thanks for hanging out with us. We really appreciate you listening and supporting us everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Patreon. If you hang out with us on Folklore Thursday, on Twitter, any of those places. We love being with you guys. You mean the world to us, really. So now let's switch over, Michael, to the rest of our conversation with Seth and Lyle. It's a lot of fun. It's funny.
Those two are hilarious.
Those two guys together, especially at that time of night, really funny guys.
It's sad that we didn't get video on this specific episode as well, because watching Lyle with some of his Star Trek miniatures,
Chewbacca and Star Trek miniatures on the Skype, that was hilarious.
That was a treat.
And poor Seth, just loopy as can be because he's a brand new dad, and I'm sure he's just up all hours of the night.
And back to back with projects.
Yeah, projects and interviews. These guys don't sleep, folks. So it's a privilege to have them here on the show today. So let's switch over and talk to those guys right now. Seth Breedlove and Lyle Blackburn on the Monster Guys podcast. Seth, we're obviously talking about the Mothman of Point Pleasant, your brand new film documentary that'll be dropping, I believe, tomorrow for the world to see. And Michael and I have had an opportunity to preview that. It's a stunning piece of work.
Yeah, it's great.
Congratulations to you, but give us your thoughts as you process out of this whole experience of filming and move into the movie release. Where are you at right now mentally? What's going on?
Well, we just had a baby like 2 weeks ago, so mentally I'm in a very strange place. I'm super emotional over this movie. I really am. I don't know that I don't think I've ever had this experience before, because it's like the first time where we gave ourselves enough leeway and enough room to really work on every aspect of the movie. And it's as close to being like me actually being able to let go of this as I've ever been with one of these films, where I was like, okay, I feel like I have done, like, you know, I can put it out there. So that's been very strange. We actually finished the edit. What was the final edit? Was like 2 weeks ago, Lyle, or longer even? Maybe like 3 weeks ago even?
Yeah.
I mean, and the movie doesn't come out till June 2nd, so we definitely gave ourselves a good amount of room to finish up and do everything about as good as it could get. I mean, of all the movies we've made, I think this is, I always say Whitehall is my baby, but this one's probably going to go down as my favorite that we've made thus far. Not to say anything against Boggy Creek with Lyle here, but I feel like we learned a lot working on Boggy Creek. You got to think, like, we went from Minerva Monster, which was a very small scale independent movie, to Beast of Whitehall, which was, actually a shorter film than Minerva, but, hopefully we upped our game on that one. But then we went into Boggy, which was our first attempt at like a feature length, large scale story, and to take off from that into Mothman, which is like this whole, it's a whole completely different subject matter in a way from what we'd been working in on the other three movies. And you have all these weird aspects to the story, like UFOs and Men in Black and all that, and figure out how to tie all that together was a real bear for us. But I think at the end of the day, it's been an amazing experience for me. And I'm really, really grateful to have had the chance to kind of play a role in telling that story and to get to do it. It was as long as Lyle's here, it was really an honor to have him involved in this movie, especially because we did enjoy working, or at least I enjoyed working with him. I don't know how he felt about me, but I enjoyed working with Lyle on Boggy. So to get to have a chance to kind of go back to it with this film was kind of a cool experience as well. But all of that is just the long way around saying, yes, I'm very proud of the movie, very emotional. And I think we did a good job. I think Brandon nailed the score. I think Zach did a fantastic job on the cinematography. I can't say enough about the animated sequences and the artwork that was done. Lyle killed the narration. His narration in this is like it reminded me of scenes in Logan. I don't know. There's something about Lyle's voice on this one that's different from Boggy. He sounds like Johnny Cash crossed with Hugh Jackman as Logan. He's got a cool kind of delivery in this one. So all in all, this was completely a team effort. When you see the final movie, there's so many pieces of this that I can point to and say, this person did that. This person did that. Guy named Nathaniel McRoby did the CG Mothman sequences. My wife created the timeline. It was a real team effort. So great job to everyone else, and I'm very proud of what we did.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. You just covered all the bases. Thanks, Seth.
Well said.
Lyle, those are pretty high marks. Johnny Cash, Hugh Jackman, I've got to agree with him. This was just all in all a gorgeous production, a stunning film at the end of it all. What are your thoughts on this side of it? You served not just as a narrator, but as an executive producer, if I'm not mistaken. This is also, the last time you worked with Seth, it was Boggy Creek Monster, so it was kind of your specialty, your game, coming right out of your books. You didn't write a book on the Mothman that I know of yet, and you're going into a whole different dynamic here. What are your thoughts coming out of it at this point?
Well, first off, say yes, I did plan to sound like Hugh Jackman and Johnny Cash, so I'm glad that worked. But no, I definitely it's stressful to do that narration, and I give it my all, to do it my best, and I'm glad it came out like it did. Working on a Mothman movie was cool because I don't know how many people have asked me if I'm going to write a Mothman book. I don't know why. There's a lot of Mothman books been written and a lot of good ones, but this gave me the opportunity to work on something Mothman related without having to, do it all myself. And that's one reason I like working with Small Town Monsters, is because there is an actual team. When I'm writing a book or some of these other things, it's me leading, and this way I can, contribute to a greater team effort. And for the Mothman story, I think that's essential because it's a huge story. It's something huge to tackle. So it took, a talented team with Seth directing and Zach with the cinematography and Brandon on the soundtrack and all the artists and everybody that contributed. So it was a great experience. And I think even though I didn't participate in the first two Small Town Monsters films, I watched those and I knew Seth and, was sort of watching the progression of those. So I think everyone has gotten better. And that's simply because, when you're running, something from the ground up, every time you do it, you learn something, you get better. So of course the films, each one are better. The passion behind all of them is always there. And you want to do your best to make a good film, but a lot of that is experience, and especially along the way you're assembling the team that can deliver it. So with Mothman, you're going to see the next level of Small Town Monsters filmmaking. And of course, the Mothman story is the one to do it with because it's got everything. And so it was a great thing to work on and enjoyed contributing. And, this time, I was, obviously Boggy Creek, I can contribute a lot more as far as the research. In this one, it was more of a role that I did to, help with the script and to do the best narration I could and just sort of just sit back and be an executive producer and give my opinions, which hopefully helps create the best product we can.
Yeah, absolutely. In our review of the film, one of the things I talked about was how the first two films, were just wonderful productions. They were great films. Really enjoyed those. We talked about those on our previous interview with you, Seth. Going into Boggy Creek Monster, you guys just knocked it out of the park. There was a whole different level. But going into the Mothman film, I believe, and I believe we stated it like this, that it's a whole new era of filmmaking for small town monsters. You guys just really rocketed through the stratosphere, and you could tell the team was gelling together. Every aspect of the production was coming together. It was on point. So I believe Small Town Monsters is the group to watch, and we're just excited for the public to get to see this.
It's interesting you say that, because one thing I look at when I watch the film is I try to sit back and look at it, and I don't just look at it as simply a film, a monster film that is shown to people who already know about the subject or already interested about the subject. Would it, is it a film on the level of something that could appeal to somebody that knows nothing about it? Like they just like, this looks kind of weird, I'm going to watch this. Is it going to be on that level? And I think this definitely is. That's the thing. You could be anybody and watch this, come away and just say, wow, that was an amazing documentary. I didn't even have any idea this existed. And wow, I just learned all about it. And, now I'm going to go look into more about the Mothman. So that's really cool. And I think it is that level you're seeing, that it's a documentary about a subject. It doesn't matter what the subject is. It's a professional documentary.
And consciously, I think that we've tried to do that with each of the movies, is make them something where like a general audience can come to them and enjoy it regardless of the fact that they might not be usually into the subject matter. But I don't know that I definitely don't think we fully achieved that with the first two movies. I think with Boggy, we started reaching more of a general audience. I think with this one, what clued me into the fact that we finally had really achieved that goal was watching it with my in-laws, who have no interest in this stuff at all. And they were so fascinated when they finished it that they borrowed the Richard Gere Mothman Prophecies movie from me, because they were so fascinated by the backstory behind the whole thing. And that's, the Mothman story is so multi-layered. It really is a fascinating story. Like, regardless of how into UFOs or cryptids or any of the stuff you have to see that this is an incredible story.
DC and I have researched the Mothman pretty extensively, and we've found where a lot of those stories are told, and then you go back and you listen to other versions of the story, and there are some discrepancies here and there in tellings. There were a couple stories, particularly Tom Urey, the story of Tom Urey in there where a giant bird flies around his car. His statement was that a giant bird was what he saw. But a lot of people that first told that story, came out and said, well, he saw, according to Tom Urey, what he saw was a flying humanoid. And he came back years later and said, no, that's never what I spoke of. So seeing those little details in the film and hearing certain bits and pieces that you guys were very clear on was really nice to see, because it did come across as very professional. You guys were not looking for sensation. You weren't creating any stylistic controversy or anything. You were going for cold, hard facts from what people reported. And that was really refreshing to see. And I think it lended to its own sense of urgency, really, with the story.
Yeah, and the Mothman story is one where a lot of the different witnesses claim to see a lot of different things, and over the years, some of those early stories have been lumped into like typical Mothman sightings. I think the Urey one is a good one. I think the one that stands out the most to me is we mention it briefly in the film, and it's on the timeline, but the Benjamin Enoch's Paul Yoder sighting in the TNT area. Those dudes saw an owl. Like they in the newspaper reports initially, they said they saw an owl.
Yeah.
But over the years, that's become a Mothman sighting. And I actually spoke to, I want to say it was Benjamin Enoch's. One of those guys is dead now. I can't remember which one, but I spoke to one of them on the phone. He didn't want to be in the movie, but he told me, he insisted that from the very beginning, they said what they saw was just a large owl. But over the years, it's been added into like the popular kind of legend about the Mothman, that they saw the Mothman in the TNT area, but it was never that. They saw the owl. More than likely, they saw the owl that was killed at the farm outside of Point Pleasant that was inside the Mothman Museum for a while.
Yeah, and I believe with this film, Seth, you've reached your trademark again, what I believe has become your trademark through these films, and it is that of a storyteller. And you're kind of this almost an umbrella storyteller, gathering other stories and storytellers together and allowing that to flesh itself out. Talk to us a little bit about the story, and I want to just maybe just for a brief moment, if you can just explain for listeners who may not know, what is the Mothman, and then talk to us a little bit about that storytelling process, because you spend a lot of time with people, allowing them to draw the stories out of their own life, and really you just create a platform for all those stories to flourish.
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking of this earlier tonight, and I'll get into the what the Mothman is in a second. But first of all, Lyle definitely played a part in the storytelling on this movie, since he co-wrote the script with me. He went through all the narration and fine-tuned everything. And as always, he fact-checked a lot of the information in the film. So definitely, there's credit that's going to go to Lyle on that. The other thing is that what I do is gather information. Like you said, I'm not the guy. I wasn't there in 66 and 67, interviewing these people. That credit has to go to guys like John Keel or Mary Heyer, or even more recently, guys like Ken Gerhard, who've written about some of these stories. So when I'm gathering all these stories together to put in the movie, we're drawing on years worth of research by other people. The Mothman case is this 1966, basically two couples driving outside of a deserted, what's called the TNT area. It was a TNT munitions manufacturing area outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. They see this humanoid creature, winged creature on the side of the road. I say humanoid. They called it a bird. They called it a big bird. And it chased their car into Point Pleasant. They reported the story to police, and over the kind of next 13 months, multiple people started seeing the creature. Different types of encounters, close-up encounters, seeing it from a distance, having it chase cars was a pretty common occurrence. And simultaneously, while that's going on, there were massive UFO flaps taking place around West Virginia, and especially in Point Pleasant. Later on in our film, we introduced the Men in Black element, which was basically these shadowy kind of figures started showing up in Point Pleasant and harassing witnesses of Mothman and UFOs and asking them bizarre questions and kind of just making a nuisance of themselves. So our film focuses on everything that happened over that 13-month span of time from 1966 to 67, culminating with the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Now, what the Mothman is anyone's guess, and hopefully that comes through in the film. We let people make up their own mind. We're basically just presenting them with information and then letting our audience kind of figure it out for themselves. I don't have any answers as to what the Mothman is myself, but it's such a fascinating story. But yeah, the storytelling process on this one was daunting going into it. We didn't even know if we were going to make this movie until maybe 2 weeks before we set out and actually got our first footage, which would have been last December. I had a meeting with Jeff Walmsley, who curates the Mothman Museum, and I basically went to meet with him to ask him if he thought there was a movie here, if there was even enough material that wasn't out there or that hadn't been put out there so many times that people were sick to death of hearing it. And Jeff told me there was, and he said, this is, here's some people you can talk to. And the big turning point for us was when Jeff gave us those original eyewitness interviews. And, someone like Lyle's going to understand what a big deal that is. For Jeff to turn over those audio taped interviews to some Yahoo who shows up with a camera, like, that's years of Jeff's life that went into contacting those witnesses and driving out. He had to drive hours to interview Merle Partridge, and all of that was his own dime going into that research. And again, that's something Lyle's going to understand. And then to turn that over to us and just be like, here, you can use it in your movie. The 8mm footage you see in the film of the Silver Bridge collapse, the day after the Silver Bridge collapse, that footage has never been seen before. That's a family heirloom of the Walmsley family. It was actually shot by Jeff's father the day after the bridge collapse. That's never been seen by the public. And Jeff just turned that over to us. So gathering all this information and trying to figure out some way to make it clear to our audience was extremely difficult. But I think what helped me figure it all out was to to come to the realization there has never been a very clear-cut chronological look at the Mothman story ever, in documentary form at least, and maybe not even in written form, where it kind of, gathered everything together into one place. And we didn't gather obviously every single bit of information, but as much as we have, I can't think of another documentary that has this much in a chronological fashion. And so once I came to that realization, then things started clicking together. It's like, well, let's get a timeline in there. Let's make sure everyone understands this stuff's happening fast and it's ramping up, and it all kind of culminates with that bridge collapse. And then once all that was done and the editing process was well into play, I wrote the narration and sent it to Lyle, and then Lyle sent me back an email that was like, good God, man, what is wrong with you? Like, this is the worst narration I've ever read. And he thankfully cleaned it up considerably, and we have what is a much more polished version of the script done. So, like I said earlier, this was honestly the biggest team effort we've had on a film, where every single aspect of the movie has someone else's hand in it other than me. It's like it's everyone working together to make it. I mean, I got to call out Chris Scalf for the animated sequences. Those are really awesome.
Yeah, they are.
It's such a unique way to work too. The guy does a full painting and then he animates that in post. So that's a full-on painting, and then he literally goes in, he tweaks everything. I can't grasp the way he does it, but he literally goes in, he animates that. And then Matt Harris's illustrations. And something really cool, Chris's son Brandon, who's a younger dude. I got to meet the Scalfs last year, but Brandon's maybe, I want to say he's like 18 or 19. He's the one that did the kind of bizarre ink sketches of the Mothman that show up every now and then throughout the film. That's Chris's son Brandon. So it was a real team effort, and I think gathering all that information into one place was extremely difficult, but really rewarding to see it all come together.
It's a tremendous amount of trust that these people in this community have put into you. And again, I think I go back to the fact that you're a storyteller that provides a platform for that story to come alive. And that is, it's hard to say this, but there's not a lot of trust in our society anymore. So I believe that you've gone in, you're a trustworthy person, and people have placed that trust on you, and it's a huge responsibility. Lyle, I know you do this with just about everything you touch. When you go into communities and you spend years with these people and their stories and their lives, and they put that trust in you, how important is that? How can you explain just how important a process like this is with regards to telling that story? And again, like you said earlier, put a monster in there or put an automobile in there. It doesn't matter what it's about. It's about the people, and it's about their story and the trust that they place in you. How important is that, and how do you approach that and handle that when that trust is given to you?
Yeah, well, I think it's very important, and it's one reason that these films or my books come across as well as they have, is because people are willing to share information with Seth and I, and that's built, obviously the reputation you have. Like, Seth has made other movies. So when he goes to Jeff Wamsley and approaches him to discuss this, well, Jeff already knows where he's coming from. He already knows that whatever he shares is going to be, handled respectfully. It's going to be presented in a very intellectual and fair way. So these kind of reputations are important. And that's really the only way you're going to ever get these stories told to the most accurate way, is to have it shared by the people who are closest to that. And like Seth said, I mean, these, we may be working on a documentary, but you have to acknowledge all these guys in the past that have worked on it. I mean, they have stacked bricks on, building this building of information, John Keel and, all the way to Ken Gerhard, all these guys in between, just tons of people who have sort of taken their own spin or their own shot at trying to explain this case, which is hard. Nobody can provide any definitive answer, but everybody can surely have a fair chance at their shot at presenting the information and giving their opinions. For Seth and I, we're more of either a filmmaker or an investigative journalist. I just simply present the stories, the facts, and let people decide. I don't try to sway anybody. And it's the same thing we both have the same approach to that. We let the people tell the story. We show the visuals, or we quote them, or whatever we do. And once you do that, people see that you're approaching this in a smart and respectful way. People are willing to share. And that's one reason I think that, people have enjoyed what we've done, is because they know they're getting the facts as best as we can present them. And it creates a body of work that hopefully, builds trust with more and more people. You can say, well, here, look at our old films, or read one of my books, and that will kind of give you an idea of where we're coming from. You can trust us with your information, and that's great. I mean, what you're going to see in this Mothman documentary, even I was like, wow, I've never seen this stuff before. It's just we're so thankful that people were willing to share the films and the audio clips and their thoughts on the Mothman case.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of information in this film that is not found elsewhere. And for anybody who's listening, who's on the fence saying, well, I know the Mothman story, or I've seen it all before, I promise you need to see this film. There is information in there. There are stories in there that you're not going to find in a normal course of researching this topic. Seth and Lyle and their team have done an outstanding job of being able to draw out stories that, in my opinion, almost like they've been hidden away in a time capsule and buried somewhere in Point Pleasant, and you guys have gone in and opened that thing up, and there's some really cool stuff in there. So whether you think you know the Mothman story, and maybe you do, but whether you do or not, this is definitely a film worth watching. This may be a question for either one or both of you. Last month, we spoke with Ken Gerhard about flying humanoids and some of the creatures and the topics that he deals with. The Mothman obviously came up in that conversation, and I posed the question, why the Mothman? Why is it so important? And I pose the question to you guys, why is this story so important in the context of the research of cryptozoology, monsters, legends, and particularly in North America? Why is the Mothman story so important to us, and why do we need to pay attention to it?
I'll give my quick answer, and then Lyle can give something much more intellectual, because mine is just, I just think as one of these stories, I'm not aware of anything else that has this many layers to it. Just, between the UFO encounters and the Men in Black and the small town cultural angle, the fact that the TNT area was full of contaminated water that may have seeped into the drinking water of the town itself. I have a friend, there's a weird connection where I have a friend that worked for a major company who was responsible for dumping some of the chemicals into the TNT area back during the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And they have files that are marked Mothman. This is inside a major corporation. They have a filing cabinet marked Mothman, not TNT area, not McClintock Wildlife Management Area. They mark it Mothman. And it's just because the town is so connected with this story. And I can't think of another town that is the size of Point Pleasant and Gallipolis, which are fairly, they're small towns, but there's, a few thousand people. So you're not talking about Falk, where there's only 800 people or whatever. This is a few thousand people, so it's a decent amount of people. And then you've got the bridge collapse tragedy, which affected everyone and is obviously tied into the Mothman story. So for me, it's the multi-layered aspect of the story and the fact that culturally it affected Point Pleasant and the surrounding area. I'd argue even all of West Virginia and the Ohio Valley to this day.
Yeah, I think that the Mothman, it's one of those cases, it's one of the most popular, I guess, cryptids or even paranormal cases because it involves so much else. And I think one reason for that is it kind of appeals to different levels, many different levels. The Mothman itself, is it a flesh and blood creature? Is it something else? Is it an omen? When you have something as disastrous as the Silver Bridge collapse, and prior to that, you're seeing a shadowy figure, it's something that is spooky. It's something that people, question. Was that an omen? Anytime you have a winged humanoid type entity, It also kind of, brings up visions of angels and things like that. These are things that are deep within our psyche, for as long as man has been around. These are the kind of things that have been woven into our religion, our mythology, and everything else. I mean, if you look at mythological creatures, Icarus trying to fly and all these kind of strange winged creatures, there's just something about a humanoid creature with wings that brings up that angel or demon, omen, shadowy creature. Is it a cryptid? Is it an owl? And then you add in all the other aspects like UFO activity that was going on. You add in the men in black. There is something in there that's going to, strike a chord with anybody who's even remotely fascinated with, the strange and paranormal. And I think that's the reason Mothman is, gotten to be such, a huge legend among strange stories, is because of all that. It just got so much into it. And that does then make it a challenge to present a story, but it's one that, is important to tell. And the great way about like the way that Seth designed this to tell the 13-month leading up to it, it kind of gives you a more clear path to follow because there's so much in it. But that it's just counting up to that bridge collapse, and it gives you the best presentation of the chronological happenings that occurred. And, so I think it's, for me, even just watching this movie, I was like, wow, just overwhelmed with how amazing the whole story is, and the way it was presented is going to bring the best clear vision of what the Mothman is to the viewers.
This is an outstanding story because of how much documentation and how many reports there are. Before Mothman in the US, there were quite a few stories about the Men in Black that were starting to pick up. And the Mothman kind of helped to popularize the Men in Black idea and the Men in Black story as well. That has kind of continued. In one of our recent episodes, we covered shadow people. One of the stories that you guys covered, the sighting of a shadowy being in one of the eyewitnesses' stories, he was describing the Mothman, but it also fit the description of a shadow person. Strangely enough, Men in Black also kind of fit those descriptions most of the time of the shadowy people that kind of appear in your bedroom. In any of your research, did you guys see any of these stories continue on past the 70s into modern day, or did any of the eyewitnesses that you spoke with or any of the people that you spoke with in town, did they give you any indication that things had continued on to this day?
The one that springs to mind is Linda Scarberry, because Linda claimed to see the creature multiple times over the course of 1966 and into 67, but she also claimed to continue having visions of it or seeing it through, I want to say, the 70s. I don't know how long that continued, but she continued to have all sorts of weird things happen after her encounter with the creature, and it was something that we were torn on including in the movie or not including in the movie. In the end, it fell out of the movie for the simple reason that Linda wasn't in the movie herself. We actually were trying to get the rights to use an interview with Linda in the film, and that fell apart. But Linda talked in the interview about how she wished she'd never encountered the creature that night and all this stuff, because there were things that happened in her parents' home where she moved after her encounter. She moved back in with her parents. Like, they basically had encounters with shadow people, what she called shadow people, in the house. They saw things like crucifixes turning themselves over and all sorts of weird stuff going on. And this was after her encounter. That's the one that springs to mind, is Linda Scarberry. But there certainly are encounters with what people claim to be Mothman type figures up until today. Our movie tends to focus solely on that 66 to 67 era, and I was torn on including maybe a modern day witness interview in there too. In fact, I spoke with two different modern day witnesses. One gentleman who claimed to see the Mothman back in 2009 in the TNT area, and another who, I can't remember the exact year, but he was driving by Gallup Police and said it flew over his car. So there's still encounters with this thing, but the thing that springs to mind when you're talking about shadow people or that sort of like bizarre supernatural aspect of the story is always Linda Scarberry for me. And we allude to it in the film. In fact, we allude to Linda and her encounters with the creature right before Lawrence Gray's scene. Lawrence Gray is the guy you were referring to who saw the creature in his bedroom. There's a little bit of dialogue there where Lyle explains that Linda had that connection. But that's who I can think of.
As everybody knows, Hollywood spun its tale about the Mothman in the film The Mothman Prophecies. How much did that film come into play in your process of putting this story together? Did it influence you at all? How do you differ in terms of facts and figures that the movie presents? What's your thoughts on that film and that whole experience with this story?
I'm a huge fan of the movie. That's something I haven't actually heard Lyle talk about. I don't know if Lyle even likes that movie, but like for me, I saw it 6 or 7 times at the Dollar Theater in Canton, Ohio, and I went back with my buddies to see it multiple times because we enjoyed it so much. In fact, Zach, who shot the movie, and Jason, who's part of the crew, they were with me a couple of the times we went to see it back in 2002. So I've always been a big fan of that movie. I own it. I watch it probably once or twice a year. As for how it influenced this movie, the only thing that I can think of is visually, I tried to do some nods to it. The out of focus shots of the lights on the river and the out of focus, there's a very clear Mothman Prophecies nod with a shot of the there's like a hill across the river over on the Gallipolis side that I shot, and no one else is going to notice this except me. Just I noticed that the lights on the tower looked like the lights on the reflectors in one of the scenes in the Mothman Prophecies, and I shot it trying to make it look the same. And that's just me trying to give a little nod to the Mothman Prophecies because I love that movie. I can say the Mothman Prophecies movie was my introduction to the paranormal. I had no prior knowledge that this was even a thing that people thought. I had no real idea, I guess, at that point in my life that people thought there was such a thing as like the Mothman, or even that people put stock in things like UFOs before 2002. So that was honestly my introduction to the paranormal in general. So it had a huge influence on me.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the movie. You know, I love that movie. And, you know, I think, you know, some people claim, you know, people who are into cryptids say, well, it's not enough Mothman. But I think as far as a Hollywood movie, it's well done. And the fact that they just sort of keep the Mothman as a shadowy, you know, it's not, you know, a cheesy Mothman dude popping out, you know, chasing people or whatever. It's well done and it's spooky, and it kind of encompasses that kind of weird aspect of everything that was going on there. So I love the movie for what it is. You know, but as far as the making of this film, I never even really thought about it other than it was a part of the Mothman history. You know, like Seth said, he could put some of that in the film, but I never, you know, it's not the most accurate piece of Mothman history. So I never even thought about it as I edited the script or anything like that.
Come on, Lyle, you've got to admit that Hollywood gives us some pretty hard research that we can draw from.
Oh yes, there's, you know, that's where I always start. What's most accurate? I mean, you know, although, you know, the Legend of Boggy Creek, of course, is very accurate, but of course not a Hollywood movie, a movie made by a guy in Arkansas. So, well, you know, again, Hollywood missed out. But yeah. And there was, of course, the sci-fi original Mothman movie, which was not, it wasn't the worst sci-fi movie, but not the best. But again, I never even, that wasn't even a blip on my radar.
That movie, that Mothman movie, the sci-fi Mothman movie is where I think the cornstalk curse became popular, because they included that as a story point in that movie, and before that, no one was talking about that curse of cornstalk.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, other than people in Point Pleasant, no one outside of Point Pleasant knew anything about the curse of cornstalk till that movie came along. And I think after that, it kind of put that in people's mind that, hey, maybe there's some sort of connection here.
Earlier, you spoke about, obviously, we touched on Lyle's narration, which is, in my opinion, one of the great special effects of this film, and you don't lean on special effects in the standard sense. I look at Lyle's narration as one of those great effects, the warm, inviting storytelling. You talked about the illustrations and the animation. There's two other things I'd like you to speak to in terms of what I would call the great effects of this film. One of those is the timeline. You mentioned it briefly earlier, and I didn't even realize that your wife had created that timeline. But that timeline, I found myself wanting to hit the pause button just to read it and go back and make sure I knew where I was throughout the story. Just a dynamic effect that courses its way through the film. And I'm not sure that I've seen something like that in a film before. I know that there have been documentaries who've put a timeline on the screen, but not something that runs through it. It's almost like a river that keeps bubbling up in the film. The other thing I'd like you to speak to, in addition to the timeline, is the music. And correct me if I'm saying his name wrong. Brandon Dallo or Dalo?
Dalo, yeah.
Okay. He's just brilliant in his interpretation musically, and this score, this composition that he has for this film has just gone above and beyond. So you've got two very dynamic effects there with the timeline and the music. What can you speak to us about those things?
The timeline is something Brandon and I wanted to do with Beast of Whitehall. Unfortunately, I know nothing about this. Is seriously how small scale we are. I don't know how to use Illustrator or even Photoshop, so it never happened. I mean, it's really that simple. So on this movie, what we did is I sat down very early on with Adrienne, my wife, and I was like, look, we're going to do this timeline. I don't want to... There were a few different aspects to this. Let me start at the beginning. Basically, Brandon and I chronologically put everything together. So I created a timeline for myself and said, and I did this very early on. I did this when I first started reading John Keel's Mothman Prophecies. So I was trying to make sure I had as many of the major sightings as I could. And I started writing them down in a notes on my iPhone, and I put everything together, and then I printed it off, and then I sent it to Brandon. Brandon included a couple in there. I'm not sure, Lyle, did I ever send you a copy of it beforehand?
No.
Okay. So I got everything in that
Well,
timeline.
if you had, he would have just sent it back to you and said, this is the most ridiculous
This is
thing I've ever
garbage.
seen. We
Yeah.
need to rewrite this thing from the beginning.
Lyle never speaks that way, by the way. He's about to, I think the way he said it was like, man, this is real good. Like, he did a great job. Like, let me just fix it up a little bit. And then he sends me back something. I'm like, good God. Like, I must have just crapped the bed. But anyway, when I sat down with Adrienne, what I actually did is I took all those happenings, all the events, the encounters that are on that timeline, and I wrote them out as fake headlines. So that's why they're written the way they are. They're supposed to play out. I don't know if it comes across in the movie, but they're supposed to play out like you're reading actual newspaper headlines that might have appeared in a paper. A lot of those encounters that are on that timeline were never mentioned in any newspaper articles. So I was just trying to think of a kind of fun way to, visually describe each encounter that would be memorable. So I created fake newspaper headlines that would read like it came from the 1960s. And then Adrienne just put everything in the timeline, and we worked it into the film. That was actually one of the last pieces of finishing up the movie. And I think it's funny because every review and every person I've talked to about the movie has mentioned that timeline as being a key piece of what they enjoyed about the movie. So that was what we did with that. And then the music, I mean, I can't say enough about the music because I scored, or not scored, I did not score the movie. Brandon Dalo scored the movie. But I edited the movie to a mix of like Boggy Creek Monster score and Beast of Whitehall score and some Minerva Monster score. And then there were other times where I wasn't scoring or editing to anything. So there's no audio, And when you sit down with his music for the first time and you watch everything together, it's always a really incredible experience. The biggest for me was on Beast of Whitehall when he added his music into it. I remember we sat together in my office and it was about 3 a.m. and we'd been working nonstop for like 2 weeks, and he put the music in there and we sat down and watched it, and I told him it was like watching the movie for the first time, even though I'd seen it like 100 times. And I had that same experience with this, where watching it with his score in it was just a completely different experience from what I was expecting. It's his best work, but it goes beyond just like, oh, it's his best score. It's like, this is a professional score. I was listening to it today, and I'm not saying any of his others weren't. This is just on a different level. I was listening to it today while I was driving to the grocery store, and I was just like, it struck me how each song is so unique, but it all ties together so well. And he grew so much on this movie. And, a lot of that has to do with the fact that he loves the story, as much as I do. I think Brandon and I loved this story from the beginning. We were both automatically kind of attracted to it, and we talked very early on that we wanted to have this very like heavy kind of mood to the music because of the bridge collapse and all that. And obviously Brandon just interspersed that throughout the soundtrack, and I think it's got a very different mood from the other films we've made. Just wait though, dude. Wait until you guys hear what he's doing for Invasion, because it's the weirdest. This Invasion movie is going to be the weirdest thing we've ever done, and this score he's creating is like so bizarre and so cool.
I can't wait.
So yeah, he's awesome. He's great, and he was a key part of the movie being what it is.
And I think you'll also have that CD available, or the music for download available. Maybe by the time the film drops, but am I correct in that you'll have this available?
Yeah, the Kickstarter backers are actually getting the soundtrack for free on CD, and then there should be, I'm hoping I ordered enough copies, there should be 60 to 70 copies available for sale. And that's the way we do soundtracks. We sold out of the Minerva Monster soundtracks a couple of years ago, or about a year ago. We don't have any more, so they're gone. Beast of Whitehall, we still have a few of those left. We haven't done a Boggy Creek printing, but we need to at some point. And then we have a limited number of the Mothman soundtrack.
My gosh, you've only got 60 or 70 copies that'll be left over. Those suckers are going to fly.
Yeah, probably.
They're going to fly like that band Ghoultown and their brand new CD. Some guy, Lyle Blackburn, I know, that just released something, I think.
That's right. I got to say, I do music, but, Brandon's scores on these films are just mind-blowing. They really are pro. I just wonder how long before he's snatched away, by Hollywood to do the remake of Mothman Prophecies. No, but for real, he's on that level. It's just amazing. Like, it's something you don't have to worry about. That's one thing, it's like, there's a lot of data going in these, the shots, the technical aspects of these, getting the right script, trying to narrate it right. I never worry about that soundtrack, because when I see the cut, whatever first cut, and hear some of that, I'm like, whoa, this is just amazing. So as a musician myself, I do something different in terms of band and songs with lyrics and choruses. There's a whole art to doing soundtracks, and they are worthy of buying the CD and listening to it. It's something you can chill out to and listen at home, because they're that good. And I'm just so impressed when I hear his music for these movies.
I'm really excited to hear Invasion's soundtrack as well. I think for me, watching the three documentaries for the Bigfoot collection, Whitehall, Minerva, and then Boggy Creek, it certainly did help to create a flair for each one. Boggy Creek, the visuals, the color, and the music helped create that feel of the swamp. That was really ingrained in my mind when watching the film. And Mothman is much more, it's not necessarily down to earth, but it doesn't have that swampy feel, and it creates a much more intense feeling for me. And I think Lyle's voice helps with that. It's very intense and soothing at the same time. But I really do look forward to hearing what he comes up with next, especially if this next one is going to be more in the bizarre area.
Something that people might not pick up on, Mothman was shot with what is called a digital Bolex D16. It's a really weird camera. They actually discontinued it about a year or two ago, and Zach really wanted to shoot with this thing. The crazy thing about this camera is we shot in the tightest focal lengths. Like, we're talking like most of the shots are probably 85 millimeter. Like, I'm not exaggerating. Like, and I think it adds this like really claustrophobic kind of feeling to the whole movie. And if you go back and watch the movie knowing that the A camera, the bulk of the shots are being shot in this insanely tight kind of focal length, it's kind of cool to watch with that in mind, because you start to pick up on what Zach is doing visually, that a lot of people are going to respond to that without ever realizing why they're responding to that. And in a way, it worried me early on, because I was like, well, this is so different from Boggy Creek. Boggy Creek, we shot 21 millimeter was the average focal length, so you had a really wide shot. This is as far in the opposite direction as you could go.
Yeah, and we have a lot of film geeks that listen to this podcast, so you just touched a nerve there. I'm sure a lot of people are real excited right now listening to that.
I have to ask, you talked about Invasion being bizarre and weird. In this set, I know there were a couple moments like off camera and on camera with Boggy Creek that you guys talked about were just kind of spooky or weird. That howl that you heard after finishing that scene. In this story, was there anything that stood out as strange, or I should say stranger than the rest? Anything that just really piqued your interests?
You mean like something weird happening to us, or
weird happening to you, or just a tale that was unusual or unexpected?
As far as like anything happening to us, we really didn't have anything. The only thing that was really weird was some sound issues we had with the trailer, and I'm talking like it was the most bizarre sound technical issue we ever had. Like some people, Lyle might remember this, some people were able to hear dialogue on the first teaser trailer we cut, and some people were not able to hear dialogue. Like there was something going on that we still aren't really sure of how it happened. So that was really weird. We definitely did run into some technical issues that we still haven't figured out. I think Lawrence Gray talking about encountering the Mothman in his bedroom was unexpected. I knew the story going into filming the movie, and it's why we set up the interview with him, obviously. But the way he told the story is what I didn't expect. I expected his story to be so goofy, like some guy encountering the Mothman in his bedroom, that there was no way that was going to play well on camera. And instead it was actually very unnerving. Even being in the same room as Lawrence when he was telling it, there was so much emotion in him when he told it that it started affecting all of us. When he left, we all said, every guy there said that was by far the best interview we've ever shot. It was just a really weird experience hearing him recount that. He was shaking. You couldn't see, but his hands were shaking while he was sitting there. When we shot the interview, he teared up toward the end of it. It was just a very unnerving kind of experience having him tell that story to us.
Yeah, that was an unsettling experience. I remember talking with Michael about it afterwards, that you could tell that he was being physically moved, physically affected by what he was talking about. Very powerful moment. All that technical stuff, those sound issues, Seth, that was definitely Mothman related.
Definitely.
And,
yeah, definitely.
I believe you also had a misspelling on one of your title proofs that came through. That was Mothman related as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think you should use it for marketing and put your critics to rest.
Yeah, we will. Don't worry.
Seth, you put out a message to some of your followers, I can't remember if it was Twitter or Facebook, asking where does Small Town Monsters go next? What would you like to see? Have you received any ideas? Do you have anything that has interested you beyond Invasion? Can you even think that far out? I don't know.
I mean, we have 2018 vaguely planned out. We're putting out, Mark Matsky and I are putting out a Small Town Monsters guidebook, which is something, obviously Small Town Monsters began life as that kind of thing. So that's what we're going to go back to that and work on that. And we've got a very special guest involved on the writing of that book. Someone, who we're both big fans of and who it's kind of crazy to have involved. But we're going to work on that. We've got something kind of cool cooking with STM, bringing a friend of mine who's a filmmaker on to create his own Small Town Monsters film. That will be a shorter project. It'll be coming probably toward the back half of 2018, and then we'll have one feature-length film coming out in 2018. Unfortunately, I don't know what that is yet. I know it's the final High Strangeness project, and I know it's going to be, what I want to do is either Utah, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, that kind of thing. I really, terrain-wise, I know what I want to see geographically. I'm just trying to find a story that really appeals to me. We want to get back at some point here soon after Invasion, possibly even after the last High Strangeness movie. We do want to get back to the not smaller scale movies, but movies with maybe one or two main people, kind of like Howie Caton was in Minerva or Brian Gosselin was in Beast Boy Hall. At least for one movie or two movies, just because I do love having those stories where you've kind of got this one person that's carrying you through. I guess in a way, Boggy Creek was like that with Lyle. Lyle kind of carried us through that, but it was so big and expansive. It feels like it's it's got so many moving parts to it. But I definitely at some point would like to get back to that kind of story. I know that we're going to get to Momo. Everyone asks me about Momo now because I've talked about it on every show I've done. We're going to get to Momo eventually. I got to get to it. And we want to do possibly at some point here a UFO trilogy as well. So we're looking towards the future. Through 2020 is where we're starting to look already.
Have you considered Skinwalker Ranch?
Yes, we're looking into it. It's a possibility for the third High Strangeness movie.
That's a hard nut to crack, that one.
Yeah, that's our biggest issue there is I'm not sure if we would be able to get the permission to shoot on the ranch. And if we can't shoot on the ranch, I just don't see the point, in making that particular movie.
Yeah.
So unless someone airdrops me in with a camera and I'll run and gun, I'll just run across the ranch filming and then, all right, we got our B-roll, let's go.
There you go. A couple questions for you guys individually. Seth, you're stranded on an island and you know that there is a small town monster's monster somewhere on the island. Which one would you want it to be? And would you become friends with it or try to get away from it or stand and fight? And if you become friends with it, what drinks do you share?
Minerva Monster. I'd chill with the Minerva Monster anytime. I don't know. We'd probably down like a cream soda. He's super. I think Minerva Monster was a she. She's super chill. I'm pretty sure she doesn't drink though. She's not an alcoholic. So we'd probably just hang out on the beach and talk, and she'd tell me about her crazy life killing dogs and stuff.
Wow,
it'd be great.
So the Minerva Monster is a cream soda dog killing monster. Cream soda drinking dog killing monster.
Oh yeah,
sounds pretty chill.
Yeah. Lyle, how about you? You find yourself in the middle of an open field and you come face to face with the largest Bigfoot you've ever seen. Your only weapon is your guitar. Which song do you choose and how do you overcome the Bigfoot with music? And do you live?
Well, they say that Bigfoot is often curious about music, so I would have a pretty good starting point there. So I'd probably play my version of Where the Flowers Bloom, also known as Hey Travis Crabtree from the great Legend of Boggy Creek movie. Then I could, have that sort of kinship, and if he, explain that I'm familiar with his Boggy Creek brethren, and hopefully that would buy me some time to not get squashed by the Bigfoot.
Fair enough.
And do you feel he also drinks cream soda?
Well, most of the Bigfoots I research, I'm pretty sure they drink moonshine.
Okay.
Southern.
That's what I'm saying. That's the South. See, we're up here in Ohio. These bunch of babies.
Totally different deal. Down here, yeah, pretty much the moonshine. It's found in the bottomlands and forests of the southern areas, and certainly, I'm sure a Bigfoot or two has ventured to take a sip and probably wonder what the hell humans are doing drinking this stuff and why we're so dumb.
I've got to say, for the listeners, this is a podcast and it's all audible, but we're on Skype right now with these guys, and I can see Lyle's reaction, and when Seth starts talking about cream soda, Lyle just starts shaking his head like there's no freaking way.
Sounds relaxing.
Yeah, it does.
Now I want one of those.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time tonight. Just a fascinating conversation. Very excited about the release of The Mothman of Point Pleasant, brand new film by Seth Breedlove and Small Town Monsters. Seth, take a moment, if you will. Tell us how we get our hands on this film, how listeners can purchase it, download it, the music as well, however we need to contact you and Small Town Monsters.
Yeah, the movie on DVD is available through shop.smalltownmonsters.com, and we also have the t-shirt and mini posters, soundtrack, all that at shop.smalltownmonsters.com. That mini poster, by the way, we have the variant poster, which was also designed by my wife, which is
amazing. I'm sorry, I had to interrupt you. That is a stunning poster.
That's a little, again, like I feel like that's a little visual nod to the Mothman prophecies with that one. So, but that's a little variant poster, and then the Sam Sheeran poster. Those are available through the store. I don't think they're in there yet. They should be in there toward the end of the month. Soundtrack and all that's on there. The movie will be streaming through Amazon and Vimeo on demand on June 2nd. That is a sure thing. It is hopefully also going to be available on iTunes on that same day. We're working very hard with our distribution company to get that movie into iTunes, but it is a task and a half. We're still waiting on Boggy Creek Monster to get into iTunes, and it's been months now, and it's been months with Beast of Whitehall too. So hopefully they break that barrier and get in there pretty quick here. But regardless, Vimeo on demand and Amazon, it'll definitely be available there on June 2nd. And then we're doing some screenings, around Ohio, and then actually around the country. I'm screening Boggy Creek Monster in Missoula, Montana in September.
Played there.
Did you?
Yeah, great. I love it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there in September for the Big Sky Bigfoot Conference, and they're putting on a special Thursday night. I'm blanking on the date right now, unfortunately, but let me see if I can dig that up while I'm talking. But I'm speaking at the Big Sky Bigfoot Conference, kind of about small town monsters and things like that. But then we're also doing the screening in Missoula, and that is taking place on Thursday, September 21st. So if you're in Missoula, Montana, I'll be there showing Boggy Creek Monster. We're doing a few different screenings of Mothman, but obviously the big public premiere of the film is at the Mothman Festival. And then I'm also showing it at Lauren Coleman's International Cryptozoology Conference, which is September. What is it, the 15th? No. I think it's it's Labor Day weekend, so it's going to be it's Sunday, September 3rd. We're doing the screening at the International Cryptozoology Conference. So there's a lot of stuff going on, guys. And then Invasion should be out on October 24th is the plan.
Nice. Just in time for Halloween.
Yeah, I'm actually totally wrong on that. Invasion should be out on October 20th.
Still in time for Halloween.
Yeah.
Lyle, tell us where we can find your books, your music, all the good stuff that you've got going on right now.
Well, the easiest place is to come to lyleblackburn.com, Lyle Blackburn.com. There's links there to where you can purchase the books. Of course, my books are available through me on my store there. You can also get them through Amazon, through barnesandnoble.com, all the places where finer books are sold. And ghoultown.com. You can get a link off lyleblackburn.com. Check out my music. We just dropped a new video, obviously, a new album. So there's the other side of me, the musician. So whether you read or listen to music, I got you covered. And if you like films, then we got you covered on Small Town Monsters. So drop by and check it out.
I think we have covered all bases tonight. Thank you, gentlemen. As always, we'll put links up in our show notes and on our website at themonsterguys.com, and you can easily click through those to find Lyle, Seth, Small Town Monsters, Ghoultown, all of the projects they're working on. Really easy there. So thank you again, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure as always. You guys are always welcome back on the Monster Guys podcast for anything that you're doing. It's just always a great time talking to you.
It really is.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you having us on and always, giving us a chance to talk about what we're doing. It's one of my favorite podcasts.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
We appreciate that.